Well, hello. Welcome to Lecture 9. We're still in the 1920s, so this is happening at the same time as Lecture 8, but it's focused on economic things going on. Now, I often think of discarding 9 from the lecture series. In some ways, it's not particularly important, but it's one of the more interesting and fun lectures to give, and it actually has some lessons that I extrapolate out and try to connect to today. So I think there's some value in this lecture, and it's kind of a pleasant change of pace from all the politics, politics, politics. Okay, war, war, war. So we're going to talk about this. I'm going to go ahead and leave it in. We'll see what happens. So anyway, this is the Roaring Twenties, a very busy decade. Like I said, we've already covered Lecture 8. Talks about what's going on in there. Well, let's talk about some things that are driving a successful economy in the 1920s. It's a prosperity decade. All right. So there's lots of things going on that are helping to make for a really sound economy. Okay, lots of people making money, and we're going to work through some of these. We'll cover A and B and C, and then D we'll probably skip over a lot of D because it's kind of boring. So we're going to talk about some of the industries that are driving this strong economic situation in the 1920s. We'll work through several here. There's 4 on the PowerPoint, and I might add another one for fun. See if anybody's listening. So first on our list here, construction industry. So this is a pretty famous photo. I've seen it on posters in history classrooms. These are steel workers in New York City having lunch. Yeah. Now I saw an article a couple of years ago. Someone did a little research and decided that these steelworkers didn't normally eat lunch like that. They were showing off for the cameraman. So I guess it's a posed photo. Still, it takes a lot of nerve to walk out and sit down on that thing, doesn't it? Right. So there's a couple slides here. This is when they built the Empire State Building in New York City. Okay, and then in the background here, I'm going to play with this pen. I'm learning how these things work. There's the Chrysler Building, okay, which is another tall skyscraper in New York City. Okay. So lots of jobs to be had here building things like this. Okay. There's also a big construction boom down in Florida. You erase that. It's pretty cool. People have decided Florida is a good vacation spot. There's lots of resorts being built along the ocean, big hotels and stuff like that. So jobs there. Now later, a hurricane hit Florida, took some of the steam out of that, but there's still lots of jobs to be found building up the cities. Okay, but what's really going to be driving things are some new industries, things that really haven't existed prior to the 20s, and that will cause an explosion in new jobs. Okay, and the most important of these, certainly one that is certainly still with us today, is the automobile. Okay? Now, automobiles aren't new to the 1920s. They've been around for a while. The Ford Model T, check my handy dandy notes here. The Ford Model T came out in 1908. Okay, so that's 12 years prior to the decade of the 20s. So the cars have been around for a while. But what happens is they start getting, more affordable, getting down to where people can buy them. And so if they really take off in the 1920s, I have some statistics here. Okay, according to my notes, let's hope the notes aren't wrong. The United States in 1915 built less than 1 million cars. Now that's a lot of cars. I mean, there are people buying cars in an earlier time. But by 1928, we were producing 5.5 million. So between 1915 and 1928, about a dozen years, the production of cars quintuples, goes up 5 times. Okay, so more and more people are buying cars. Right? And so, of course, that's a whole new industry, building cars. Okay? Now, here's where I want to step away from the PowerPoint a little little bit, or from the canned notes, things I want you to think about going forward. Okay, so I tell you, there's these new things, these newfangled automobiles that everyone's buying. Okay? Well, that's good for the auto industry. Companies like Ford and General Motors and Chrysler, all making money building cars. But let's look past that. Okay? Now look at this picture here. All right. Now here's where I usually have some fun. I call it to the class. What do you see here? The class answers back. The class isn't here. Okay, so that's going to take some of the fun out of this lecture. So I'll have to play both sides. Okay, so I ask the class, I say, hey, what do you see in this picture? Okay, and someone will say, well, a car. So yeah, but what do you see in the car? All right, let me get the pen out here. Oh, pen. What's all this? Steel. Okay? So is the growth of the car industry also stimulate the steel industry? Help them out? Sure. What else have you got here? How about this? What's this? Glass. Okay. Now, do you think Ford makes its own glass, or do they have to farm that out probably to somebody who specializes in that? Sure. Okay. Oh, how about these? What are these? Tires. All right. Means rubber. Okay. Companies like Firestone, Goodyear, Goodrich, car manufacturers are going to turn to companies like that to supply the tires. So the car manufacturers, build the parts and assemble the cars, but they need raw materials, and a lot of the parts are subcontracted out to specialists. Things like tires, batteries, things like that. So this can stimulate other industries more than just the car industry. It's not just making cars, it's making all the things that go into cars. Okay? So just like earlier when we talked about railroads can stimulate the steel industry, the oil industry, the coal industry, the automotive industry can stimulate all kinds of additional things. But let's go a little further down the rabbit hole, shall we? Steel, rubber, glass. Look at this photo. Do you think a guy dressed like Abraham Lincoln just happened to be walking down the street and stopped to look at a Lincoln? No, it's an advertisement. So all these new cars have to be advertised. So there's money for advertising agencies. And where do you buy this thing? Look. It's a Lincoln dealer. So now there's jobs. And so the cars are made mostly in Detroit, although there's other places where they assemble them as well. But there's jobs building the cars. But then every little town, or medium-sized town, is going to have some kind of dealership selling, Fords or Chevrolets or Oldsmobiles. Okay? So there's jobs selling cars, okay? Advertising cars. So I mean, this is an industry that didn't exist basically in 1900, and by the 1920s, it's really exploding. Now, talking about advertising, I've got a picture here. Here's another ad. Well, let me erase the little squiggly lines here. All right. Here's an ad. You can buy a Chevrolet for $775 if you can save up the money. That was real money back then. $775 you can get a Chevy. Okay. Here's mom and the kids that they're feeding a squirrel. Let's hope it's not rabid. And so you can do this. Okay. So here's where normally it gets fun. Okay. So you've saved up your $775. You've bought your Chevrolet. What are you going to want to do with it? Take it home, park it in the driveway? No, you're going to want to go somewhere. You want to take a drive, don't you? You want to go see something, go visit your relatives. So what are you going to need? You want to drive this brand new car across uncharted fields over stumps and ruts? No, you're going to want a road. Okay? So now we're back to construction. Construction jobs? Hey, are there jobs making roads? Sure. Okay. upgrading dirt trails up to the dirt roads, or actually paved roads, so you can get on and drive that brand new Chevrolet somewhere. Okay, so hey, there you go, construction work again. So you get in the car, you're hopping the highway, you're driving down the road, you want to go see your grandmother. Okay, but eventually, what starts to happen? You're driving for a couple of hours, and you look down, and there's that needle on the dashboard. What is it you're going to need? Gasoline. Gas stations, okay? Or back then, service stations or filling stations. A lot of them were service stations. Now, most of you don't have much experience with service stations because nowadays you get the gas at a convenience store, right? You can stop and get a tank of gas and a big gulp. But as recently as when I was your age, okay, you had service stations. Maybe you'd pull into a Texaco or an Enco, which is now Exxon, a Shell, and there'd be gas pumps out front, and then there'd be service bays where cars could be worked on. Cars were much simpler back then. You could work on them with a basic set of tools. Okay? So you go in there and maybe your car's misfiring or something, and you needs a spark plug replaced, or you got a flat tire. Okay, so you need your tire repaired. Okay, so nowadays cars are very sophisticated with all kinds of computer electronics, and it takes a lot of investment to do repairs in them. Okay, and so you don't see service stations much anymore. You have to go to specialty dealers and stuff. But are there jobs building these service stations, putting in the gas pumps? Yes. Are there jobs working at them, repairing cars, fixing cars, putting gas in cars? Yes, there are. So see how this new industry expands into new areas. And I've hit the 12 minutes. I need to pause and start another slide.